Hi, and welcome back to Real Talk Fitness with AMPT. I'm your host, Ashley Cummins, and I'm super excited about today's episode. It's going to be short and sweet, but really puts a cap on all of these amazing people that I've had on the podcast and the ability to share their story and their mindset. Today's podcast is all about understanding yourself, so that missing piece to discipline. Do you ever feel like you're constantly starting over, like one week we're motivated, on track, showing up, and suddenly routine drops off and you're back to square one? You just tell yourself, just need to be more disciplined. But what if discipline isn't actually your problem? What if the real issue is that you don't fully understand yourself in terms of your values and what you believe in, and basically whether you believe you can or you believe you can't? Either way, you're right. And I feel like I'll let that one sit with you before we dive into today's episode. But whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, either way you are correct, because no one's going to be able to tell you different, right? You might feel a certain way, but your actions are doing the opposite. So let's dive into today's episode in all about understanding yourself, your values and your motivators and your identity, and how that becomes a real key to your discipline, right? So let's get started. Why most people struggle with discipline. And this is something that I have researched after all of these interviews that I've had with all these amazing ladies. And I'm bringing on a couple of gentlemen too. And most people think about discipline as about being strict or cutting things out or doing things you don't enjoy, right? But that's not discipline. That's what we classify as punishment. And eventually you just burn out. You don't just fall off because you're weak. You fall off because you're doing something that doesn't actually align with you. So you're following someone else's plan or someone else's routine or their expectations without actually asking, does this actually fit with my life? Is this what I want? Is this something that I'm doing because I value it, right? So in my podcast with Ish, she speaks about values on top of discipline, right? So if we value something and our values align, it doesn't require motivation to do it. We just do it, right? Because we value it. So it's like we value being nice to other people, so we just be nice. We don't have to think about it. Now, the same goes with your health and fitness. Is if you value it for the right reasons, yes, there's going to be some times that you're not motivated, or yes, there's going to be some times where you're just going to show up, but showing up isn't going to be the problem because you value it. And more to that is, I feel that if you followed somebody around for the day, you would see what they value, right? You would see where they spend their time, because we all get the same 24 hours in the day, and it's all how we sort of prioritize it to what we feel is a priority. So discipline versus alignment. Discipline gets a bad rep because people confuse it with restriction. But real discipline is actually alignment. So it's like our values. So when your actions match your values, your habits match your goals, your lifestyle matches the person you want to become. And when all of that happens, you don't need to rely on motivation as much, because you're not constantly negotiating with yourself or doing things that you don't want to do. And it, as I spoke about earlier, it's that punishment factor. So it kind of brings me to motivators, like what actually drives you, and getting to know yourself and your values and what you want to become, that deeper version, will give you a clearer picture, right? You'll no longer feel like you're punishing yourself or you're restricting. So this is where you need to get really honest, because a lot of people say they want one thing, but they're actually driven by something completely different. For example, let's use I want to lose weight. But what's underneath that is I want confidence, I want validation, I want better energy, I want to feel more in control, I want to feel like myself again. So really, they're saying that they want to lose weight, but underneath that, they actually just want to feel confident in their own skin, but they're putting that that if they lose weight, they'll feel more confident, or if they lose weight, they'll get validation. So you really need to understand what is that real driver. Otherwise, you're going to lose direction as soon as results slow down. So we often talk about, all of us coaches, and something that's come up in common in all of these podcasts is consistency, right? So consistency compounds over time, and doing something every day doesn't mean it has to be done 100% every day, but doing just a little bit each and every day builds up over time and you'll get results. But it's like you can't go to the gym and just do one session one time and expect to be, 5% body fat and jacked. It doesn't work like that. So if we don't understand the real driver, we're going to lose direction as soon as you don't get instant gratification for the work that you do. And results always slow down at some point. The other thing that I feel like we need to get really clear on is it an external motivator? Because external motivators do not last. So we have internal and external motivators. So an external motivator will be like a challenge or a deadline or a holiday, a number on the scale. But once that's gone, so's your consistency. So we really do need to rely more on our internal motivators, which is really getting to know what actually drives you. And these are things that don't expire. So things like, I want to feel strong in my own body. I want to show my kids what consistency looks like. I want to prove to myself I can follow through. Because those things don't have a deadline. They are your anchors. And when motivation dips, when you're really honest about and deep dive into these things, that's what keeps you showing up. So that brings me to the values, right? And this is exactly what we spoke about in the podcast with Ish the other day on values and mindset, is values aren't just things you say. They're shown in what you do consistently. So you can say, I value health, but if your daily actions don't reflect that, there's a disconnection there. And then that disconnection creates frustration, guilt, that constant feeling of starting over. And then somewhat we're back at that beginning where we feel like we need to be more disciplined, or we look at punishment, etc. Because what you're saying and what you actually truly value, or your actions, there's a disconnection. And people try to fix that by, as I said, going harder, being stricter, adding more rules. That's not the fix at all. The fix here is alignment. Because when your values are clear, your decisions become easier. You don't need to overthink everything. You don't need to rely on willpower every day. You're simply acting in line with what matters to you. And that's where discipline becomes more natural, right? And that's where your values and getting that deeper understanding of what drives you to do what you're doing in your health and fitness goals helps you become more aligned with who you are and what you want and what you value. Now, there is no right or wrong. I feel like this is where people try and put themselves in a box. And my most recent interview and podcast with Gemma is we speak about that, is that, no one can tell you what you can and can't do. That's completely up to you. And comparison is the biggest thief of joy, right? We always think that, again, going back to, I want to do this because I want to feel more confident or more validated. Those things come from within you, not from an external point of view. So this is where we really got to get deep on the understanding of ourselves and what actually drives us and what your values are. And then we will start to make actions that align with those, and they will no longer feel like a punishment. And I guess that brings me to identity, right? That real shift. This is the level that most people never reach. They stay stuck in, what should I do? Who am I becoming? So when I say they get stuck in what should I do, how we flip that is, who am I becoming and who do I want to be? And what are the behaviors of the person that I want to be? And what do I value as a person? Do I value healthy eating because it makes me feel better? Do I value training because it empowers me to what my human body can do? Do I value a number on the scale because it gives me gratification? Or I think, this is where external and internal motivators, or do you value that because you think that that's going to give you external gratification? Because behavior change doesn't stick until your identity and your values align with that. So you can follow a plan, but if you still see yourself as someone that's inconsistent, someone who always falls off, someone who struggles with discipline, what our body does and what our brain does is it constantly finds ways to prove ourselves right. And our identity works in both ways, right? So instead, you start to build evidence. So your brain goes, yep, see, I told you that you're inconsistent. And then you start to believe that. So instead, you want to start building evidence on the small wins. I show up. I follow through. I take care of myself. There's one bit of advice I can give you and you can take away from today's episode is never break a promise to yourself twice. Doesn't matter on what it is. Never break a promise to yourself twice. Because when you start to follow through, your brain starts to build evidence and starts to reinforce that you can do it. And that becomes your standard. Not something that you try to do, it's something that you are. And when this happens, discipline becomes automatic. So let's strip this back and make it real, right? So if you're listening to today's episode and you're kind of feeling stuck and you're like, how do I find out all of these questions? This is for you. So I want you to grab out a pen and paper and sit down and actually answer these properly. What do I actually value right now in my life? Not 5 years ago, not what others expect, but right now. So write that down. You can pause the podcast and answer that and come back. Number 2, why does this goal matter to me? And I always have this theory in all my self-development sessions is there's 5 whys to your real answer. So why does this goal matter to me? Confidence. Why is confidence important? Because I'm not confident within my own body. Why are you not confident within my own body? Because I might have been bullied growing up. So really dig deep into this one, guys, and until it hits something that is really emotional, that is actually now going to be your internal motivator, and that's going to be your why. And you don't want to feel like that anymore. So you start to value the things that are going to bring you out of that. Number 3, what motivates me when no one's watching? So do you do it for external or internal reasons? There needs to be more internals than externals. So write down internal motivators, external motivators, and do a list for this one. Number 4, where am I currently out of alignment? So be honest. Now remember, when you're writing these things down, is that you're not showing them to anybody. You're just getting really honest with yourself. And that's where the growth is. So what I mean by that is, what am I saying? And then what am I doing? Are they currently in alignment? Number 5, what is one standard I can hold myself to daily? This is where you're going to build self-trust. So as I said before, never break a promise to yourself twice. Because discipline isn't built in massive changes. It's built in keeping promises to yourself. Showing up even at 70%. Choosing consistency. So it doesn't matter what it looks like when you show up, but as long as you never break a promise to yourself. And the only way you can do this is get really honest with what you value and what your reason why is. Not because of what society says that we should do. So to share something personal on that is, I love powerlifting, but I love endurance sports, right? And Gemma really enlightened me on this in my last podcast episode, in terms of saying, like, you can do it both. Who's to say that you can't? Just means that one's going to take longer. Doesn't necessarily say that it's wrong or right. All right. So when you rebuild trust with yourself, you rebuild discipline. And then when you get honest with your values, things that used to feel like a punishment should become more natural. So instead of keep saying, I just need more discipline, what I want you to take away from today is that you just haven't taken the time to understand yourself. You're skipping that most important step. You're trying to fix that outcome without building and fixing that foundation. And that's why we feel stuck. So instead of asking yourself, how do I push harder? Start asking yourself, why am I not aligned? Why do I feel like I want one thing, yet I keep doing the polar opposite? And once you really become honest with this, and this takes time, don't get me wrong, you're not going to listen to this podcast, be able to write down the answers instantly and feel better, right? It's something that you've actually got to work on. And once you do this, everything becomes easier to execute. So I really hope that you've taken some things away from today's episode. As I said, it was short and sweet, straight to the point. But I feel like it really puts a cap on these interviews and podcasts and finding out deeper meanings in other people's mindsets of how they've gotten successful in different areas. And how can you become more aligned with you? Because discipline isn't something you chase. It's something that shows up when your life's aligned. So when your actions reflect your values, when your habits reflect your identity, when your goals actually mean something to you. And that's when it sticks. When you start doing what makes you happy rather than what you feel is going to make other people happy or make you more socially accepted. Work on understanding yourself. Because once you do that, you don't have to keep starting over. You're actually going to build something that lasts. So again, thank you guys for tuning in to Real Talk Fitness with AMPT. I really hope that this episode's resonated with you. And if it has, I would love to see those that are listening. So share the podcast, message me. I'd love to hear what you've actually gotten out of these. I love creating these podcasts, and even if you've learnt one thing from today, that helps me help you, and by that we can continue to change the world. So thank you again, guys, and until next time, keep it real.